Hello, everyone. I'm Janet Salmons, Methods Guru for Sage Method Space, and I'm here today with Jean Brenny and Shannon McMorrow to talk about their new book, Photovoice for Social Justice. But before we get started with that, if you are new to Method Space, this is a blog community hosted by Sage Publishing, and we're focused on all things to do with designing, conducting, analyzing research, writing about it, sharing our results and in all different kinds of ways, and hopefully to create some kind of impact. And you can see at the kind of center of this diagram, we have teaching and learning, because we feel that whether you are a student or just beginning as a researcher or an experienced researcher, that we all have something new to learn. And I hope that will be the case today. I'd say that I was really excited to discover your book because I'm interested in both in photo voice and in social justice. So welcome, Jean and Shannon. And why don't you just start by introducing yourselves?
Of course. Thanks, Janet. It's great to be here. Thank you so much for inviting us to do this. As you mentioned, I'm Jean Brenny. I am in New Haven, Connecticut right now, the land of the Paugussett and Quinnipiac peoples, their native land. And just briefly, my research. I've been working in the field of health promotion and health education within public health for longer than I want to say, about 30 years now. I haven't done photo voice for that long, but my work has always been focused on sort of eliminating and addressing health disparities and trying to increase and elevate health equity through the use of community-based participatory research methods and practice. So I am an academic. I do a lot of teaching and some research. It's a teaching university, so I have more sort of connection with students. And so that's sort of my mission has always been to try to make a difference, I guess. And as we talk about more, photo voice for me has been the research method that works best for making a difference and making change, social change.
Shannon?
All right. Thank you so much for having us. It's really exciting to be here. So I am Shannon McMorrow, and I am joining from Grand Rapids, Michigan today. I am an assistant professor with Western Michigan University. And like Jean, my background is in public health, education, and promotion. And I have had kind of a diverse background of being both a practitioner in the field across the United States, and then starting my academic career in Uganda in East Africa about 15 years ago. So have cultivated an interest in community-based work, health education, and then carried that into my career as an academic. And for about the past 10 years, my research is focused on using photo voice to elevate the voices of women in diverse populations.
Well, you certainly, the backgrounds you both bring to this are so relevant, given what, we're going through today. So why don't you begin by just explaining what photo voice is for people who are new to this kind of research?
Sure. Absolutely. And I'll start, but as you'll see, we've been told, right, Shannon, that our writing is seamless and we sort of build off of each other. So we'll kind of do it back and forth without and it'll just happen sort of organically.
Yes, sounds
First,
good.
let me just sort of mention, because we do have this picture up on the screen right now, that this is a picture of a tree trunk that's literally kind of growing through a brick wall. And so one of the things, and we'll talk about the details of photo voice, is obviously photos are the data. We utilize photos as the research, and people discuss their photos in the research.
Mhm.
The research is we do this is from a study that I did with trans women of color, and they were already an existing group. And so sometimes, as we know with research, you kind of start from scratch, and sometimes there's an existing community group that's working that wants to do some more work. So this group had been working together for years, a group of women transitioning from female to male, I mean male to female, for over the course of years, and they all had similar backgrounds. They're all women of color. A lot of them have had an HIV diagnosis. Many of them had been homeless and or incarcerated. And they felt that the image people had of trans women was really negative, and that they had HIV and that they were in prison. Like, and they wanted to kind of show a different side of that. So they asked me to come in and help them with a Photovoice project because one of the women was a student in our social work department. So I had the pleasure. This was just a joyful project to work with. And we worked together to kind of uncover with them what they wanted to tell the world about transitioning. And so this picture, so what you do with the Photo Voice project is you have questions that people answer through photos and bring come back together as a group and discuss them. So this picture represents courage. One of the women who actually led the support group, she wanted to show the courage it takes to really stand in your truth and be able to transition from male to female or female to male, whatever it is. And so that's so the picture standing on its own doesn't say much. So when we present photo voice data, we do have the words along with it, and we have examples of that later in the video. But so I'm going to stop in 1 second. So photo voice is a qualitative research method. It's community based. It's participatory. So everybody involved in the project is a co-researcher, and that means we are all involved with every step of the process, from the beginning to the end, even to the dissemination of results. So I'll stop there and let Shannon say more.
Yeah, so I like how you talked about for that group, but what you said that what they wanted to tell the world. So that's really the essence of the method, is focused on what the participants want to tell the world, first through their photos, what they choose to photograph, and then what the photos they choose to share. So like Jean mentioned, it is participatory. So it's all of those decisions are driven by the participants as co-researchers. So which photos they take, which ones they want to share in the group, which ones they want to talk about in the group. And then in terms of kind of visualizing the method, I think for other researchers, sometimes it's helpful to think about it as in the group meetings, it's an adapted focus group. So it centers on the photos, but you sit in person, you sit, in a semicircle in a group or in a comfortable setting. And as the researcher or project leader, you facilitate it like a focus group, but it's all centered on the photos. And then a couple of other key parts of Photo Voice, as envisioned by the women who created it within public health, really had a core goal for it to always culminate in some sort of advocacy and sharing the photos and the stories in community settings. So most projects have that built in as well. So working with participants to decide whether you want to share the photos in a public forum and invite different kinds of people with power or leaders in the community, or as Jean can share an example of, there can be direct advocacy with Photo Voice, where the participants take their photos and their stories to legislators or city leaders to ask for policy change. So that's also a key part of it.
Mm-hmm. Right. So, I was fascinated when I first saw, the title for your book about Photo Voice for Social Justice, because Photo Voice can be used in, all kinds of research, for all kinds of research questions. But, I think, you've started to kind of allude to that of, it's about people telling their own stories and creating some kind of documentation that could be used to advocate for change. But tell us a little bit more about the social justice piece of that, which I think, today, a lot of researchers, maybe who in the past, were not motivated to think about those kind of social implications, that's becoming more and more important to researchers. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Sure. So I think first of all, Shannon and I are both in public health. And quite frankly, also, truth be told, we went through the same MPH program at San Jose State University, not at the same time, but somebody put us together. This book wouldn't have happened without that person, Kathleen Rowe, putting us together. But public health as a field is action oriented. Our field within public health education, health promotion, is action oriented. I'm not we do research or we do practice for change. We consider ourselves change agents as much as we can.
Mhm.
And um, community-based participatory research as an approach to research is also action oriented, not just Photovoice, but any sort of research method done within a CBPR framework. Its intention is to translate the results into some kind of an action, a policy change, a new health promotion program, or changing a current program. And so Photovoice is just one of the many methods you can use within a CBPR framework. And Carolyn Wong, who, as Shannon alluded to, is really we think of her as the mother of Photovoice within public health, to take what's been going on with photojournalism or documentary photography and change it into a research method that acts as a linchpin to some kind of a change, right? So the fact that we're both in public health, and that we're trying to do better, trying to help things become better. Like, another example, that in my work, I've done a lot of HIV prevention and sexual health promotion, and try to how do we get people to wear condoms, and how do we get people to get HIV tested? And there's a lot you could do with just straight education, but taking research and then translating it into action is what we're really passionate about. And so Photovoice works really well with that, because not only do you have words, but you now have visuals. And the visuals, along with the words and the people you're working with in the research project, can be transformed into, like Shannon alluded to, an advocacy effort. This example, not this example, is a different example with women living with diabetes. They're community health workers, and I did a project with them. Just really quick story. What they wanted to do was rebuild a community center in their neighborhood in New Haven that had been long ignored by the city. And they had no place to exercise. There were no community gathering places in the town. And so it took a very long time. But what we did initially was we took the pictures and the words, and the women wanted to go to 5 locations in the city of New Haven, including the mayor's office. And that's where we ended up. And we had to sit down with the mayor. It took a couple of mayors later for the change to happen, but they stayed with it. And I think the power of it was the visuals, the ownership, of the women in the projects. As Shannon and I have talked about, this is it's a partnership. And so they took it on. The life of this project went on way past my role as researcher with them. And that's the piece that creates the social justice, I would say, is being able to do something with
Right.
these pictures.
Right. It's really going from, say, thinking about social change of like, okay, we can do things differently, to social justice. We can do things differently in a way that is fair and inclusive and respectful and all of that. Shannon, I wondered if, thinking about, the kind of relationship aspect and the participant aspect. I mean, clearly, this is not the like come in, do the interviews, go home, kind of research. So, maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, a key, I would say a key skill or interest for researchers who conduct photo voice is that relationship aspect. So, and this will lead into our next discussion as well, either in person or virtually. Because you are working jointly with the participants as co-researchers, it's important to build group rapport and do different kinds of group facilitation and group building exercises. So those again are kind of inherent to the training that Jean and I have in health promotion, but anybody can do that. But those are parts of kind of building a relationship. And I think something else that's part of the overall working towards social justice is, we keep mentioning it, but working with the participants as co-researchers, and to the extent possible, sharing power with them. So working on those group relationships and dynamics to, there's an inherent power imbalance with university researchers, right? And there can be lots of other areas of power imbalance, but as photo voice researchers, you really invest in time in building relationships and working on sharing that power. And something else I was going to mention, and just kind of building on what Jean was saying, that as we are working on Photovoice with the participants, it's often seen as kind of a dual approach that can be both research and you're gathering data, but it's also can be transformative for the participants themselves. So it's rooted in some of the Paulo Freire empowerment education and raising consciousness for the participants, and that can be a process that even if it doesn't come out in the data at that time, later there can be a process that has led to change in the participants that links to social justice as well.
Right. I think, just, for the participants, the creative nature of it for them. And I mean, I know I do painting, and, I look at things differently when I'm representing them. And so for the participants to make, go through making those choices and, framing what they want to share and that sort of thing. So we have some more photos. Do you want to talk about
Sure.
these other ones?
Yeah, if you want to go to the next one, I wanted to, it's actually, you just gave me a thought to say something else, building on what Shannon just said. This is a picture. So when you're working within the photo discussions, building again on Shannon talking about it being really based in Paulo Freire and critical consciousness, what you're trying to do. So this is a picture from the same project with trans women, and I think the picture, a little bit of it is called. This is a gorgeous wedding gown. And there's a huge train, and she also works at a bridal shop, the woman whose picture this was. And so you and I and Shannon and 5 of our friends could look at this picture and come up with all of what we think that this picture means. It's a beautiful dress, maybe about the price tag, who knows. But having this woman in our project take it, and then what you do is go through a series of questions with each person in each picture to get to the root causes of what's going on in this picture. What made her want to pick this picture for this project on this day for this question? And that's also where the social justice comes out. So for her, this represented to her a dream. There's actually 2 sides of it. Actually, this was a powerful discussion. One was hope. The theme for her was really hope. That she hopes that someday becoming a woman for her really meant like the white wedding dress and the perfect wedding. And she has scrapbooks of pictures and things from wedding magazines, and she's telling the story. And she had been engaged, and the engagement was broken off. So this also was a very painful picture for her to talk about. But again, this is her picture and her story, and she was getting to the bottom line of, I want people to know that I'm a woman, I'm living as a woman. These are the dreams and the hopes I have, just like anybody who was born female. I wasn't born female. I live as a woman now, and I want to be able to be I'm actually getting chills, be a bride wearing a white wedding dress myself. And so that's the power that I think we try to get to. That's the power of the photo voice, of the discussion, like you said, framing it, having them frame the picture in the context of the research. And there's a variety of ways to do that. It's in the book, it's in a lot of every article about photo voice, and you sort of break down the picture with a series of questions to get at the real bottom line reason for what is it that you want to share. And so with those discussions, and you can go to the next picture, because I know I don't have to talk all day about all my pictures, but you sort of, then those words and pictures become the data. And then this is, I think, this one is a different project. This is actually with a group of young college male students, undergrad students that I worked with around condom use. And I had them think about who was responsible for safer sex. They were heterosexual men. Who was responsible, just talking to men. And one of them brought back this picture. And that's all you say. You say a question, they go take pictures and come back. And I was like, okay, tell me about this picture. So I never would have noticed it as a woman, but they pointed out that condoms are found in the female hygiene aisle, feminine hygiene aisle, right? Not typically an aisle men go down. That's where the tampons are, and the ovulation kits, and the birth, whatever all those things are. But there's the condoms. So they said, you know what? No one's putting them next to the razors or the baseball mitts or whatever men shop for. So we don't think, we feel like society is giving us. So we get to again, why did you take this picture? They laughed about it. Then you keep asking these questions, and they got to this point of society is telling us it's a woman's responsibility. It's the stores put it, you go to Walgreens or to Stop and Shop, and they're in the same spot. So again, it's power on a different level, but how can we use this information? How can we use these pictures and these words to make some changes? Like, can we just say, let's put condom, there was a time when condoms were behind a locked cabinet. Let's make them more accessible. How can we get them out there so men feel, they don't want to buy them down there. They don't want to go down that aisle. So anyway, so I kind of digressed a little bit, but I did have that picture in there. And then this is just another project of mine, and then I'm handing it back to Shannon as we're kind of transitioning to talk about virtual. So this year, we both have been doing Photovoice virtually, and I've been doing 3 projects on how COVID has impacted BIPOC communities. And so this was just a picture showing the isolation of learning at home, of a little child who is learning at home, and he doesn't have his friends around him, and he's just by himself at the table with his little computer. Not sure what that is exactly on there, but he's so we did one project just around learning online during COVID and how the pandemic has impacted kids in BIPOC communities. And so we're still doing that project. That one's not done yet, so I don't have an outcome for you yet, but again, just the picture itself could have many different stories. That was their story for this picture.
Right. So yeah, so maybe you could talk a little bit more about the kind of pivot towards doing some or all of the study online, given the constraints that we've had and that continue in some parts of the US and the world.
Shannon, do you want to talk about your next picture, or should we talk about virtual?
Sure. We could talk about that last picture and then go into virtual. So this is a sample of what it can look like when you pair the stories with the photo. So in this case, this was a project with women who are Congolese refugees living in a Midwestern city. And that's actually a longitudinal Photovoice project that I started in 2016 and then was able to follow up with them 3 years later in 2019. And there were the transcripts from the discussion, and then we go back to the participants and say, this is what we gleaned from the transcripts. Is the member checking that you go through with other qualitative research, so they confirm. So this particular one linked to a theme of occupational health risks that were pretty prominent through both years of the study. But just a good visual for when we share photos in a public exhibit, or if we put them in academic dissemination, they can sometimes look like this paired together with the quote. So the next slide, I think, is starting to answer your question, Janet, about Jean and I are just putting together a lot of ahas about moving online with our Photovoice research. So for us, we've been doing this in person for a long time. So it was definitely a big change and something that we came to because we had to because of COVID. But one thing that we are realizing is that it really can be, a great option for some populations and some study goals. So for example, the project that I am working on is with women students at a university who identify as either international students and or Black, Indigenous, or other people of color. And it has ended up that the participants have been able to join from 5 different countries at the same time. So this is a study that I would have done in person, and I'm hoping we'll get back together in the fall to be able to share an exhibit. But that's been a big kind of aha moment about thinking about transnational Photovoice and kind of international projects. And then I won't talk about all of these, but what you're looking at on the screen are 4 different areas that Jean and I started to kind of compile our ahas and reflections about the things that are different and the things that are important to think about when doing Photovoice virtually versus in person. So I don't know, do you want to summarize those, Jean, or
thanks.
point out anyone in particular? Well, there's so much. I don't know how much. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't. I think
Maybe
I'm glad.
talk
Oh,
about
good, Jan.
the kind of the last two on the table, the sharing the photos online and either within the group or outside the group.
Yep. So the I have to say I had to pivot also for three projects I had just had approved and funded, and our IRB, of course, put the kibosh on anything, put it, anything person in person. So, I mean, I know you want the biggest things to think about are people's access and their internet access. Are they in a mountain cabin or are they somewhere in a city where they have access, and do they have access to WebEx or Zoom, and what's going to work best?
Right.
What I found after doing, and I think Shannon may agree too, from doing Photovoice in person for so many years, is that I personally had a job getting people to the virtual table versus coming in person. We had people really showing up on Zoom. We used Zoom for some and WebEx for some. And so but really what you need to focus on is that first bullet about what will you do to create a really strong group dynamic. And I think Shannon has mentioned that. What kind of, we typically will do an icebreaker in person, but what is it that you really need to do? And maybe you do it, we did it every single time we met, just to kind of regroup the group and reground ourselves. And I think that worked really well. The other thing that worked well is to use the chat, because there's always people want to say things and there's always more conversation that needs to go on. So that worked really well. The thing you do have to consider, I think, is I sort of wasn't sure how to answer ask the question. We're still working this through, but in person, just in general, I think it's easier for things to get wrapped up because there's the body language that happens. Students do that all the time. 5 minutes before the bell, in college, there's no bell, but you start packing things up, and online, you're kind of sitting there because you have another Zoom call, maybe right then, or so there's, so I don't think we didn't really get to things as much as we wanted to. So how flexible can you be? I think there needs to be a lot of communication around that and really being able to stick to the time and getting all the things done. The time management is very different online, I would say. And that's probably one of the biggest things that I learned. And I'll, as I mentioned earlier, I'm not really at the community presentation yet. We're working with all three of these projects to develop some advocacy work around housing issues and education issues and BIPOC communities around Connecticut. And we're partnering now with some advocacy groups already doing that work. So I'm envisioning there will be a lot being used with social media, which is something we touched on the book, Shannon and I. But that was before COVID. COVID was just sort of hitting when we were finishing up the book, and not even in our states. But that's our next thing to think about is, social media is that place where people see visuals all the time. So how can we utilize the power of Photovoice and the power of social media together to work on advocacy? So
Right.
I see I have more questions than answers about that right now.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot to think about in terms of, say, I mean, photos that I might be willing to share within a group, even an online group. And in some ways, I think, just based on my own work and my own experiences, that in some ways people feel safer because it's kind of like, you're not here in my community necessarily. I can be more free to tell you because I'm not going to run into you in the grocery store. But then when it comes to, what I would want to share on social media, it might be a whole different story. So, it would seem to me that there'd be like a whole nother level of, questioning about, what you want to share with the group where you've established some rapport and trust, and what you want to share outside of the group.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's the case even in the kind of examples that you gave earlier where, we're going to go and meet with the mayor.
Right.
But still going and meeting with the mayor with my photos of my home that's falling down because you need better zoning or something, would be different than my putting it on social media where everyone is going to have, or many more people are going to be seeing it. So yeah, I could see that there'd be some real tricky things to navigate there.
I think that's Excellent. I think you're absolutely right. And usually the photos are chosen by the participants themselves and with their comfort level, and we talk about what we want to do with them. But that's a that's a great point.
Yeah, I was going to add, just to add, you said that already, Jean, but in the fourth column, presenting photos to the community, I mean, something that's the same between in-person and virtual is that, again, is something that you work on together with the participants, co-researchers, and thinking about what everyone thinks is best for advocacy or sharing the project. And then something I think I'm like Jean, I'm not to that phase yet, but we're starting to think about it and plan it. But I think that one key thing that we have found is that for some people, the access barriers such as transportation to come in person for Photovoice meetings, those are eliminated or actually having more access. So there's the technology access, which can be challenging, but then on the other side, there can be barriers that are eliminated. And it's the same for the photo exhibit. So having a live online exhibit where we invite it could be, you know, the leaders of, for my projects, for example, the leaders of the university or people from the other countries that want to join from the countries of origin for the participants, then it kind of suddenly broadens access to that participation and getting the message out there. So pros and cons for sure.
Right. So is there anything else that you would like to add about your book, or for, you know, people who might be thinking about this kind of approach and how your book might help them to get started?
I was going to add one thing that I was thinking before is that Jean and I did work really hard to think about the audience being not only, it could be students or other academics, but this can really be applied in community-based settings. So we mentioned we're from public health, but we really tried to write it from the lens of multiple disciplines and multiple community-based professions, so that people could use it if they work in social work or they work in international development. So that's something that I think that we've been talking a lot about it from an academic perspective, but we did work hard to think about how it can be used more widely.
Definitely. That's a really good point. And I think we also, because it's a shorter book as it is with the Sage Method series, it's really accessible, I think, to a lot of people. And at the time we started it, there were only 3, I believe, books on Photovoice, and they're good sized books, textbooks around Photovoice. And so this is really a sort of a more of a how-to guide, and we try to give a lot of examples. We have a ton of references, and I think, as Shannon said, it's not just. That's why it's not called Photovoice for Public Health. It's Photovoice for Social Justice, because so many disciplines and people are trying to work in the realm of social justice, and that perhaps they'll find something here for them that will be helpful in work that they're doing as well in the community.
Right. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk about this, and I hope that our method space readers will you know, take a look at your book and you know, think about this as an approach that might either be used in conjunction with other methods that they're using, but that, you know, really gives a powerful opportunity to engage with participants and you know, kind of see rather than just hearing their words, to see what they see the world kind of through their eyes. So
yeah, exactly.
Thanks so much, Janet.
Thanks, Janet. This was great. We appreciate it.
okay.